This is Sleeping in Trees, the audiobook. Chapter 25, 7-Eleven Beer Dash. We discovered malt liquor. One Friday night, a friend of a friend pulled up in front of my house in his tricked-out Olds 442. Dinkle leaned into his open window to say hello, and soon the subject gravitated to beer. Conversation over, the muscle car rumbled off down the road. I was not party to the details arranged by Dinkle, but within 30 minutes his friend had returned. We heard him coming from 2 blocks away. In his trunk was a full case of Colt 45 malt liquor. We were all but 14 at the time, mature 9th graders, and had no idea what malt liquor even was. We did know beer, having consumed a can or 2 now and then when the opportunity arose. It was a bit tepid by the time we dragged the case around to my dark backyard and popped a couple open. It tasted terrible, so we guzzled a few. We ended up basically passing out in a dollhouse that was a remnant of the previous owners, who must have had young girls. The evening was short, and we had a fair amount of malt liquor left the next morning when we both awoke quite late, skulls throbbing. The next night, Dinkle and I were milling around out by his garage, trying to conjure up an evening of fun. Increasingly, we were being drawn to the bright lights of the 7-Eleven convenience store at the corner of 124th Street and Old Dixie Highway. It was an active, high-traffic place, and we had for years made it our destination for all kinds of consumables. Super Bubble bubblegum, Slurpees, and Slim Jims were increasingly being pushed aside by our attempts to secure beer and Tipperellos. So with no superior plan, we headed on foot to the 7-Eleven, about 2 miles away, straight up 124th Street. It was an uneventful jaunt. A steady stream of Saturday night cars rolled by as we walked along the shoulder, which was really just the front yards of the houses that lined the road. Business was brisk that night. We stood outside on the sidewalk, chewing bazooka bubblegum, and watched the constant stream of patrons coming and going. I was struck, even at my age, by the unattractive and garish retail experience offered by the American convenience store in those days. Virtually no attempt was made to provide a pleasant environment in which to purchase one's bread, milk, cigarettes, beer, or candy. The combination of bright fluorescent overheads, mottled vinyl flooring, and bland metal shelves coalesced into a stark, glaring space in which to shop. Add a restroom that might be open, locked or broken, and was certainly filthy, and the modern convenience store was the place most adults abhorred. It was positively depressing, but young teens like action, and 7-Eleven had plenty. We couldn't stay away. Dinkle and I leaned against the glass storefront and tried to look cool. We admired all the brightly colored and newly waxed muscle cars as they rolled in, rumbling and shuddering. Their highly tuned V8s idled lumpily. The drivers would slip into the store and then back out with a 6-pack of beer or a pack of cigarettes. They'd reignite their big motors, an uneven cadence of pistons pumping, with tricked-out crankshafts in tight rotation and oversexed cams lifting and dropping banks of valves. Their exhaust headers would heave and thrust through cherry bomb glass packs as they slowly backed up and then aimed for Old Dixie Highway. Effortlessly, the fat rear tires would chirp and then light up as clutches were dropped and gas pedals floored. They'd leap and lurch off down the busy highway in a cloud of blue smoke. It was a fun show to watch. A bright orange Pontiac GTO pulled up aggressively and parked right in front of us. The tall and lanky driver, wearing a t-shirt and jeans, stepped out and headed for the front door. Dinkle approached him and asked if he would buy some beer. He said he would be happy to. We did a double take, fished a few bucks out of our pockets of our shorts, and handed them to him. He disappeared into the store. Within a few moments, he was back outside with a brown bag. He smiled and hopped back into his car. In a flash, the GTO peeled out with a screech and roared away into the night. Dinkle and I settled back and popped a couple of ice-cold bush beers. Here we were, all of 14 years old, drinking a cold beer in one of the coolest spots possible on a Saturday night, while enjoying a colorful and very loud parade of muscle cars. We looked at each other and smiled, both knowing that things just didn't get much better, and they would not that night. Around the dimly lit corner of the 7-Eleven strode Lobster. He approached us, looked down, and smiled. I did my second double take of the evening. This was getting strange, indeed. What the heck was he doing here? He was vague when queried, but that was Lobster. He believed in economy of speech. Clearly, he had some plan underway that he was reluctant to reveal. We sipped on our beers and watched the show. Lobster entered the store and soon returned, a cold beer peeking out of a brown bag. How did he do that? He was only 16. As he took a long swig, a dark blue, nondescript sedan pulled slowly up directly in front of us. Its lights were blinding. The doors opened in unison, and a couple of clean-cut gentlemen stepped out and approached us. As they moved up onto the sidewalk on either side, almost on cue, they flipped open leather billfolds, displaying shiny silver badges. It was clear that we had a problem. Obviously, none of us were old enough to consume alcohol. It was illegal to have an open container of any alcoholic beverage on the sidewalk of a 7-Eleven. We were in trouble on at least 2 counts. The third count would come shortly. The plainclothes policeman asked our ages. I noticed that Lobster began to scan the surrounding area. He knew that it was critical that we take action before they had our identities. As the officers began to press further in their probe, Lobster shouted, "Run!" at the top of his lungs. We did. He was just a step ahead of Dinkle and me. A bit gangly and klutzy as a kid, Lobster had along the way learned how to run. We could barely keep up. In a few moments, we had covered the entire 7-Eleven parking lot and were already heading straight up the darkened road away from Old Dixie Highway. We didn't look back, so we had no idea what the response was from the 2 shocked police officers. We did hear some commanding shouts, a couple of tinny car doors slammed shut, and an engine roared to life. We heard no gunshots, though. In a few more seconds, the 3 of us took a sharp right turn, headed up a dark driveway, and were immediately in someone's backyard. The houses on 124th Street were backed by a canal. In effect, we were racing at top speed in the dark alongside a barrier of black water. We knew we were on the canal side, and the officers were likely on the street side, a line of houses between us. I wondered if we were trapped. Then the second shock within 60 seconds occurred. 3 escapees quickly became 2 as Lobster executed a high-velocity racing dive smack into the dark canal with a terrific splash. Dinkle and I were stunned, but we kept on sprinting full speed ahead. We soon hit a cross street and turned right. At the next cross street, we turned left and then right again. This jigsaw pattern directed us in a jog all the way home. With dozens of possible streets and thousands of bushy hiding spots in the area, our pursuers apparently gave up the chase fairly soon. We arrived at my house half an hour later, soaked with sweat but elated that we had escaped the officers by the narrowest of margins. There in the family room, smiling and sipping a cold beer, was Lobster, still wet from his nighttime dip. Before listening to Chapter 26, find a picture of a cockroach. Then look up the word infestation. You might just want to skip the next chapter altogether. It's up next, and it's called The Eradication of the infestation.